The first time I saw Aiden Cole, he was holding a leaking pipe in the basement of my apartment building. It was midnight on a Tuesday in February, and freezing water was spraying everywhere, already forming an icy puddle on the concrete floor. I'd come down to silence the alarm on the building's ancient fuse box that shrieked whenever there was excessive moisture. He was silhouetted against the single bare bulb, wearing jeans and a dark sweater that was already soaked through, his hands wrestling with a wrench on a valve that hadn't been turned since the Nixon administration. He swore, a low, creative stream that was more impressed than angry. "Need a hand?" I called over the hiss of the spray. He glanced over, his face all sharp, annoyed angles in the bad light. "Got a bigger wrench? This one's for show." I ran back up to my apartment, 3B, and grabbed my toolbox. My dad had given it to me when I moved to the city. "For independence," he'd said. I brought it down, and he took the largest wrench without a word, his fingers brushing mine. They were ice cold. With a grunt of effort, he finally got the valve to turn. The spray slowed, then stopped. The silence was sudden and profound, broken only by the drip-drip into the puddle. He straightened up, wiping his forehead with the back of his wrist, leaving a smudge of grease. He was younger than I'd first thought, maybe late 20s, with tousled dark hair and eyes the color of the slate sky outside. "You saved the building from becoming an ice sculpture," I said. "Who are you?" "Aiden, the new owner." He said it without fanfare, already looking around at the dripping pipes, the rusty boiler, his expression one of grim assessment. "And you are?" "Maya, tenant, 3B. He nodded, as if filing me away under a category. "Tenant, problem. Rent's due on the 1st, Maya, from 3B. Don't be late. This place needs every penny it can get." That was our meet cute. Not over coffee, but over corroded plumbing and a thread about rent. Charming. Aiden Cole had bought 1711 Elm Street, a weary 6-unit walk-up in a neighborhood that was transitioning, which meant the coffee shop on the corner sold $8 lattes, while our lobby still smelled of cabbage and old carpet. He was a property developer, I soon learned from the gossip in the laundry room. He bought value-add properties. We were the value. He was going to add. None of us knew what that meant yet, but the dread was a familiar tenant in the building, too. For the first month, he was a ghost. Then the notices started appearing. Neat, typed letters slipped under our doors. "Please be advised that common area storage is being cleared for renovation." Then, "The laundry room will be out of service for modernization." Then, the rent increase notices. A modest adjustment to reflect market rates and upcoming improvements. My rent was going up by $400 a month. I marched downstairs to the newly painted management office that had been a broom closet. He was at a cheap IKEA desk staring at a spreadsheet. "You can't just raise the rent like that," I said, slapping the notice on the desk. He looked up, those slate eyes cool and appraising. "I can, actually. The building is pre-1978. The city's rent stabilization guidelines allow for a significant increase upon vacancy or major capital improvement. I'm declaring the improvements." "What improvements? You painted the lobby beige and called it greige." A ghost and a smile touched his lips. "Aesthetic modernization is a capital improvement. So is the new laundry system and the roof work I have scheduled for spring. The roof doesn't leak. It will, and I'll be ready. That's the point." He leaned back. "Look, Maya, this isn't personal. It's business. This building is an asset. It's underperforming. I'm here to optimize it. We're not spreadsheets. We're people. Mrs. Grady in 1A has lived here for 40 years. She can't afford a $400 increase." His expression didn't change. "Then she'll have to find alternative housing. I've included a list of city resources for seniors in the packet." I stared at him, this handsome, cold man in his crisp shirt, sitting in our shabby building and talking about optimizing assets. I hated him. "You're a cliché, you know that, the heartless gentrifier." That got a reaction. His eyes flashed. "I'm a businessman who sees potential where others see decay. I'm saving this building from being condemned. You should be thanking me." "I'll thank you when hell has a zoning board," I said and turned on my heel. A week later, my ancient disposal gave up the ghost. I put in a work request online expecting the usual handyman, Stan, who would take 3 days and fix it with duct tape. That evening, there was a knock. It was Aiden, holding a new disposal and a toolbox. "Stan's on another job. I'll do it," he said, already stepping past me. "You don't have to." "I do. It's in the lease." He was already under the sink, his voice muffled. "Unless you enjoy manually scooping food sludge." I leaned against the counter, watching him work. He was efficient, his movements economical and sure. Different from the man at the desk. Here, he was in his element. He asked for a bucket, for a screwdriver. Our fingers brushed again. This time, they were warm. "Why do you do this?" I asked, unable to help myself. "The hands-on stuff. Shouldn't you be off buying more buildings to optimize?" He slid out from under the sink, his face smudged. "I started as a carpenter. My dad was one. I know how things are put together, how they fall apart." He looked around my apartment, really looked, at my bookshelves made of cinder blocks and planks, at the prints I'd hung, at the thriving spider plant on the windowsill. "You've made it nice." The compliment, so simple and unexpected, disarmed me. "It's home." He nodded, as if he understood the word in a way that wasn't just financial. He finished the installation, tested it, and packed his tools. At the door, he hesitated. About the rent increase. For you, I could phase it in, over 6 months. It was a concession, a small one, but it was something. Why? He shrugged. You had the right wrench. After that, he kept finding reasons to come by. A flickering light in the hallway outside my door, a question about the building's original molding. He'd always have a tool in his hand, an excuse on his lips. Our conversations strayed from pipes and plaster. We talked about books. He read history, dry economic tomes. We talked about the city. I learned he'd built himself up from nothing, that optimizing was his religion because insecurity was his original sin. One rainy Thursday, he came to check a reported leak in the apartment above mine. It was fine. He showed up at my door anyway, soaked. False alarm, he said, rainwater dripping from his hair. I invited him in for coffee. We didn't drink the coffee. It started there, on my couch that had a permanent slant, with the rain hammering the windows. It was angry and hungry and confusing. He kissed like he was claiming territory, and I kissed back like I was defending it. It was a terrible idea. I knew it as I pulled his sweater over his head. He was my landlord. He was raising my rent. He was everything I distrusted. But he was also, in that moment, just Aiden, a man who worked with his hands, who had calluses, and a quiet intensity that had nothing to do with spreadsheets. He looked at me, really saw me in a way no one had in a long time. In the dim light of my apartment, the developer vanished, and the carpenter stayed. Afterwards, he traced the line of my jaw with his finger. This is a complication, he murmured, but he was smiling. You're the one who evicted Mrs. Grady, I said, the reality crashing back in. The smile faded. That's business, Maya. This is something else. And I, like an idiot, let myself believe they could exist in separate compartments, that the man in my bed wasn't the man with the eviction notices. We fell into a pattern, secret dates, late nights. He'd let himself in after midnight, smelling of cold air and sawdust. We'd talk in the dark. He told me about his dreams, not of buildings, but of building a community, a place that was beautiful and functional and lasting. He sounded, in those moments, like the man I'd wanted him to be that first night in the basement. I asked him once, my head on his chest, what happens to this building, to us? His hand, which had been stroking my hair, stilled. The building needs a full systems overhaul, the wiring, the plumbing. It's a money pit. To make it work, I need to reposition it in the market. Reposition it, I repeated flatly, which means... He sighed, a deep, weary sound. It means the current rental income doesn't support the capital it needs. To get the loans for the real improvements, I need to show higher projected returns. That means higher rents. And to justify higher rents, I need different tenants. There it was, the truth, delivered in the dark like a confession. We weren't the right kind of tenants. Mrs. Grady, Stan the handyman who lived in 2C, the yoga teacher in 4A, me. We were the before picture. The secret contract of us held for a fragile, breathless month. Aiden became a study in contradictions. By day, he was the CEO of Cole Developments, a man in a sharp blazer meeting with contractors in the lobby, pointing at architectural renderings that showed our building with a glass penthouse addition and a juice bar where the mailroom used to be. By night, he was the carpenter in my bed, his hands gentle on my skin, his voice soft with confessions about the pressure from his investors, his fear of failure. I have to make this work, Maya, he'd murmur into my hair. This project is my proof of concept. If I can turn 1711 Elm around, I can get funding for the whole block. I can build something real. You're tearing something real down, I'd counter. But my anger was losing its edge, blunted by his proximity, by the way he'd look at me as if I were the only solid thing in his shifting world. He started making promises, veiled but hopeful. When this is over, when the building is stable, there's a place for you here. A better place. A permanent place. He never said rent-controlled. He said permanent. My heart, treacherous organ, wanted to believe it meant something. The first visible crack in our fantasy appeared with the scaffolding. It went up on a Tuesday, skeletal and invasive, clattering against the brick facade. The notice said, facade inspection and tuck pointing. But the crews that arrived didn't look like masons. They looked like demolition. They started on the vacant unit on the 6th floor, the one old Mr. Henderson had lived in before passing away. The sound of sledgehammers and reciprocating saws became the building's new heartbeat. I confronted Aiden in his office. He was reviewing a flooring sample, his brow furrowed. You said renovation. That sounds like gutting, I said, not bothering to sit. It is gutting, he said, without looking up. The old layouts are inefficient. Small rooms, wasted space. We're opening it up, creating open concept living. We? I asked, the word bitter. He finally met my gaze. The building, Maya. I'm creating value. For who? Not for Mrs. Grady. She got her relocation assistance papers yesterday. She was crying in the laundry room. A flicker of something, impatience, guilt, crossed his face. The assistance is generous. She can find a nice senior facility. She doesn't want a facility. She wants her home, the one she's had for 40 years. This was never going to be a senior facility, he snapped, standing up. The veneer of the nighttime confidant was gone, replaced by the daytime CEO. This is a business, not a charity. I'm not running a museum for sentimental attachment. I'm creating modern, desirable housing that will pay for the millions this building needs to survive. You think I like this? You think I enjoy being the villain? You seem to be getting used to it, I shot back. His jaw tightened. He came around the desk, lowering his voice. Don't do this here. Don't make this about us. It is about us. You're making me complicit. Everyone in this building looks at me like I'm a traitor because you sneak out of my apartment at dawn. The truth of it hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Stan, the handyman, had stopped offering his usual cheerful wave. The yoga teacher, Liza, gave me tight, disappointed smiles. I was the landlord's girlfriend, or worse, his mistress. Aiden's expression softened, just a fraction. He reached out as if to touch my arm, then pulled his hand back, remembering where we were. It's temporary, the hard part. Once the renovations are done, once the new tenants are in, the building will be better, safer, more valuable. And you'll see, I have a plan for you. What plan? I demanded, my voice breaking. Am I going to get a relocation assistance packet too? A buyout for services rendered? He flinched as if I'd struck him. Don't, he said, his voice low and raw. Don't cheapen what this is, what you are to me. Then tell me what I am, because from where I'm standing, I'm the tenant in 3B who's sleeping with the guy who's pricing her out of her home. The silence that followed was thick with everything we weren't saying. The sledgehammer rhythm from upstairs provided a brutal soundtrack. Your lease is up in 3 months, he said, finally, his voice returning to that cool, businesslike tone. It was a defense mechanism. I was starting to recognize them all. We'll discuss your renewal then, with a new fair market rent, but we'll discuss it privately. It was an offer, a grotesque transactional offer. Keep sleeping with me and maybe your rent won't go up as much as everyone else's. The worst part was the tiny, shameful part of me that considered it, that calculated the cost of my principles against the cost of staying in my home. I left without another word. That night, he didn't come to my apartment. The absence was louder than the construction noise. The next week, the eviction notices started in earnest, not for relocation assistance, but for owner move-in and substantial renovation. Legal, ironclad. Aiden was playing hardball. Stan got one. Liza got one. They taped theirs to the lobby bulletin board, next to the shiny new renderings of the building's future. The two images side by side were a perfect diorama of betrayal, our present being dismantled to make room for a glossy future that had no place for us. I became a ghost in my own life. I avoided the lobby. I used the back stairs. I stopped going to the local diner where everyone knew our building's drama. Aiden and I existed in a state of Cold War. He'd text late at night, "Can I come up?" I'd ignore it. An hour later, "I'm sorry, it's complicated." I'd delete it. My turning point came from Mrs. Grady. I helped her pack one afternoon. Her small apartment was a museum of a life. Photos of a husband long gone, children who visited at Christmas, knickknacks from trips to Cape Cod. She held a chipped porcelain teacup, her hands trembling. "He offered me money," she said, her voice thin but steady. "More money than I've ever had. Said I could go live near my daughter in Florida. Sun, he said, as if sun could replace my neighbors, my view of the oak tree." She looked at me, her old eyes sharp. "You're sweet on him, aren't you, honey?" I couldn't lie to her. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. She patted my hand. "Men like that, they love things they can fix. Buildings, deals. But people are messy. We don't have blueprints. We just have hearts, and they break in their own way." She placed the chipped porcelain teacup carefully in a box. "Don't let him box you up, Maya. You're worth more than a square foot rate." Her words stayed with me. You're worth more than a square foot rate. That evening, there was a knock on my door. It was Aiden. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, but he was holding a bottle of wine and a forced, hopeful smile. "Truce?" he said. I let him in. We were polite strangers. He poured the wine. He talked about the progress upstairs, about the high-end fixtures he'd ordered. I listened, sipping my wine, feeling Mrs. Grady's teacup between us like a ghost. "I've been thinking about your apartment," he said, his eyes scanning the room with that developer's gaze. "These original windows are great, but inefficient. We could replace them. And this wall here," he gestured to the one separating the living room from the small bedroom. "If we took this down, we could really open up the space, create a beautiful studio loft. It would increase the value tremendously." He was renovating me. In his mind, he was already sketching the improvements, calculating the added value I would represent once he'd knocked down my walls. I set my wine glass down. "Aiden." He was still looking at the wall, mentally placing a steel beam. "What happens when my lease is up?" He turned, his smile easy, rehearsed. "We work something out, I told you. A fair rate. Maybe even, if things go well with the project, we could talk about you staying on as a kind of property manager. A live-in situation." A live-in situation. Not a home, a perk, a cost-saving measure, an optimized asset. The last thread of my illusion snapped. He didn't see a partner. He saw a unit, one he had a sentimental attachment to, perhaps, but a unit nonetheless. My rent, my presence, my affection, they were all just line items to be balanced. The renovation wasn't just happening to the building, it was happening to us. He was gutting everything we were, everything we might have been, to create something more efficient, more profitable, and completely soulless. I looked at him, this beautiful, ambitious, hollow man, and I felt a profound sadness. You should go, Aiden. Maya, go, please. He left, confusion and frustration on his face. He didn't understand. He had come to offer me a deal, a future within his spreadsheets, and I had rejected it. In his world, that was irrational. Alone, I looked at my apartment, my cinder block shelves, my slanting couch, my spider plant. It was shabby. It was imperfect. It was mine, and he wanted to knock down its walls and put... The silence after I asked Aiden to leave was a living thing. It wasn't peaceful. It was a tense, waiting quiet, like the moment after a fuse is lit, but before the explosion. For 3 days, my phone was dark. No texts, no calls, no late-night knocks. The construction noises from above continued their relentless rhythm, a constant reminder that the world he was building was moving forward, with or without my consent. I threw myself into helping my neighbors. It was penance and purpose. I spent evenings with Mrs. Grady, finalizing her move to a small, sad apartment in a complex her daughter had found, a place that smelled of disinfectant and resignation. I helped Stan pack his vast collection of tools and automotive parts, listening to his gruff, heartbroken monologues about 20 years in 2C. He smiled at me when he bought the place, Stan muttered, wrapping a vintage socket wrench in newspaper. Said he appreciated a man who could fix things. Guess he only meant things that are broken, not things that are home. Liza, the yoga teacher, was fighting. She'd gotten a tenants' rights lawyer and was trying to organize the remaining residents. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion when I offered to help. Are you sure you want to get involved, Maya? It might be awkward for you. The unspoken, because you're sleeping with the enemy, hung between us. I'm involved, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I live here too. I was, in effect, preparing for my own funeral while trying to resuscitate the patient. The cognitive dissonance was paralyzing. At night, in the quiet of my apartment, I'd stare at the wall Aiden had wanted to knock down and feel a phantom ache, as if my heart had already been demoed. On the 4th day, the notice arrived. It wasn't slipped under the door. It was taped squarely to it, a crisp white envelope with the Cole Developments logo in the corner. My name was typed with formal precision, Maya Vance, tenant, Unit 3B. My hands were cold as I peeled it off. I already knew what it was, the other shoe, the bill for my defiance. I took it inside, sat at my rickety kitchen table, and stared at it for a full 5 minutes before I could open it. It was not a lease renewal offer. It was not a fair market rate proposal. It was a notice of lease termination for owner's use. The legal language was dry and brutal. It cited the relevant statute, informed me that the owner, Aiden Cole, intended to reclaim possession of Unit 3B for his own personal use and occupancy upon the expiration of my current lease in 60 days. It stated that this was his right as owner, that the notice was irrevocable, and that I was required to vacate the premises by the specified date. Enclosed was a pamphlet on tenant relocation rights. For his own personal use and occupancy. The words swam on the page. He wasn't even pretending this was about renovation or market rates anymore. This was a targeted strike. He was taking my apartment, the one he sat in, drank wine in, made promises in. He was going to move into it, or maybe he'd just keep it empty, a trophy of his absolute authority. The betrayal was so complete, so petty, it stole the air from my lungs. This wasn't business, this was punishment. I had rejected his transactional live-in situation, so he was taking the whole thing off the table. The apartment, the history, the last shred of our connection. He was erasing me from the blueprint. A white-hot fury, cleaner and more focused than any I'd felt before, ignited in my chest. It burned away the confusion, the sadness, the lingering heartache. This was a declaration of war, and it was personal. I didn't cry. I got up, my movements precise. I took a picture of the notice with my phone. I scanned it to my computer. I filed the physical copy in a folder I labeled, with bleak humor, Eviction. Then I got to work. My first call was to Liza's lawyer, a weary but wired woman named Rosa, who specialized in fighting predatory landlords. I read her the notice over the phone. Owner move-in, huh? The classic, I'm moving into all 6 units at once maneuver. It's often bullshit, but it's hard to prove. He has to actually intend to live there for a reasonable period. We can demand proof of intent, tie him up in hearings. It'll buy you time. I don't just want time, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I want to fight. What's his weakest point? Rosa was silent for a moment. The sheer scale. He's filed owner move-in on 3 units now. Yours, Stan's, and the vacant one he's already gutting. A judge might look sideways at a single guy needing 3 apartments. But his weakest point is usually them getting sloppy, cutting corners, harassment. Have you documented everything? Every interaction? I thought of the midnight visits, the texts, the promises made in the dark. I have personal interactions. Personal how? Rosa asked, her tone sharpening. I told her. The basement meeting, the disposal, the late nights, the wine, the permanent place talk. I left nothing out, my face burning with a shame that was quickly being subsumed by anger. When I finished, Rosa let out a low whistle. Jesus, okay, that changes things. That's not just a landlord-tenant dispute. That's a potential abuse of power, coercion, maybe even a retaliatory eviction. Did you save the texts? Some. Save all of them. Any gifts? Notes? No gifts, I said, the reality of it hitting me. He'd never brought me flowers. He'd brought a wrench, a disposal unit, wine, tools, and transactions. Good, less muddy. He was your landlord having a clandestine relationship with you while planning to displace you and your neighbors. A human rights tribunal would have a field day. It could scare him to back down, or at least to a very generous settlement. A settlement. Money to go away quietly. The final transaction. The thought made me sick. I don't want his money. I want to stay. Then we use it as leverage. We go hard. We respond to his notice with a formal objection, alleging bad faith and retaliatory conduct. We request all his communications regarding the building's redevelopment, his financing, everything. We make it so messy and expensive for him to evict you that it becomes a bad business decision. Can you handle that? It'll get ugly. I looked at the notice on my screen. For his own personal use. I thought of Mrs. Grady's trembling hands, Stan's packed tools, Liza's determined face. I thought of Aiden's eyes in the moonlight, pretending to see a future. Yes, I said. I can handle ugly. My next move was logistical. I needed a job, and fast. My freelance graphic design work wouldn't cover a new deposit and first month's rent in this city, not if I was fighting instead of working full-time. I spent the next 48 hours updating my portfolio and firing off applications to every stable, boring, benefits-providing firm I could find. The third step was the hardest. I had to see him. I didn't call. I went down to his office. The door was ajar. He was on the phone, his back to me, talking to what sounded like an investor. Acquisition timeline is aggressive, but we're on track. Vacating the remaining units now. Yes, including 3B. That one's key. It has the best light. We'll use it as a model for the... He sensed my presence and turned. His face went through a rapid transformation. Surprise, a flicker of something like hope, then a careful, neutral mask as he ended his call. Maya? He looked tired, but in command. The carpenter was gone. This was the CEO, sitting in the belly of the beast he was creating. I didn't sit. I held up the printed scan of the notice. Care to explain this? He didn't look at the paper. He looked at me. It's a legal notice. It explains itself. Owner's use? You're going to move into my apartment, Aiden? You, who owns a penthouse condo across town? I can have more than one residence. Bullshit. The word cracked through the office like a gunshot. This is because I told you to leave. This is because I wouldn't play your game. This is retaliation. His eyes hardened. It's a business decision. Unit 3B, after renovation, will have the highest ROI potential as a show unit or a premium rental. Your current lease is an impediment to that ROI. This is the cleanest way to resolve it. He was speaking spreadsheet again. It was his armor. And what about everything you said? My voice threatened to break, but I held it steady. The permanent place? Or was that just the relocation assistance talk for girlfriends? His muscle twitched in his jaw. That was before you made it clear where your loyalties lie. My loyalties? To my home? To my neighbors? What loyalties did you ever have, Aiden? To your investors? To your square footage? He stood up, leaning on his desk. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The loans, the timelines, the expectations. This project has to be perfect, or I lose everything. I offered you a place in that future, Maya. A real place. You threw it in my face to play hero with a bunch of people who were leaving anyway. There it was, the core of it. In his mind, he'd offered me a promotion, and I'd chosen... Walking away from Aiden's office, the notice, a crisp, accusing rectangle in my hand, I felt a seismic shift within myself. The grief and confusion solidified into a cold, actionable resolve. I was no longer a tenant waiting for her fate. I was an adversary with a target, and I had his blueprints. Rosa, the lawyer, became my general. We met in her cluttered, paper-strewn office that smelled of strong coffee and urgency. I handed over everything. The notice, a timeline of my relationship with Aiden, screenshots of texts, the few I hadn't deleted in fits of pique or passion, and the recording I'd made on my phone of our confrontation in his office. Her eyebrows climbed her forehead as she listened to his voice, tight with fury, saying, "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." "This is good," she said, steepling her fingers. "It establishes context, but it's not a smoking gun. We need to prove the owner move-in is a pretext. For that, we need his real plans." "The architectural renderings in the lobby," I said. "The ones with the juice bar. They show my unit as part of the new luxury layout, not as an owner's residence." Rosa nodded. "We'll subpoena all his project plans, financing documents, and communications with investors for the building. If he's telling banks it's a redevelopment, he can't tell a judge it's his future home. But that takes time. We need to hit him now, publicly, to slow his momentum." Her strategy was two-pronged, the legal grind and the court of public opinion. We drafted a formal response to the eviction notice, a densely worded legal objection alleging bad faith, retaliatory conduct, and a violation of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. It was a bureaucratic bomb, designed to force a hearing and by months. The second front was mine. Rosa handed me a list of local reporters who covered housing and development. "Your story has hooks," she said. "Young female tenant, charismatic developer, a romance that turns into a retaliatory eviction. It's catnip. But you have to be ready. They'll dig. They'll ask about your relationship. It will be humiliating." "It's already humiliating," I said flatly. "Might as well get something out of it." I chose a reporter from an online investigative magazine known for deep dives on gentrification. Her name was Anya Sharma. I emailed her with a blunt subject line: "Developer evicts tenant after secret relationship." She replied in 20 minutes. We met at a library study carrel for anonymity. Anya was sharp-eyed and quiet, letting me talk. I told her everything, from the basement to the bed to the notice. I showed her the pictures of the glossy renderings in our now sterile lobby. I gave her the names of Mrs. Grady, Stan, Liza. "He's using a personal legal loophole to clear out a building for a luxury flip, and he's starting with me because I said no," I concluded, my voice raw. Anya took meticulous notes. "Do you have proof of the relationship, beyond your word?" I gave her the texts, the mundane ones: "Running late, be there soon, left my jacket." The absence of love letters was its own proof. It was a logistical affair. "This is strong," she said, "but he'll say it was consensual, that the eviction is unrelated. We need to connect the dots for people. The fact he's doing this to multiple units helps. Let me do some digging on his financing." While Anya worked, I worked. I landed a job, a junior designer at a mid-sized marketing firm. The pay was mediocre, the work dull, but it had benefits and direct deposit. It was a life raft. I opened a separate savings account and named it War Chest. In the building, a strange solidarity blossomed from the shared threat. Liza, once wary, now included me in strategy sessions. Stan gave me a knowing, grim nod whenever we passed. We were the holdouts, the stubborn stains on Aiden's clean new canvas. Aiden became a ghost in the building. He stopped coming to his ground floor office. Work on the gutted 6th floor unit continued unabated, the noise a constant reminder of his looming vision. I'd sometimes see him from my window, arriving or leaving in his sleek car, never looking up. The intimacy we'd shared felt like a dream dreamed by someone else. Then Anya's story dropped. It was published on a Tuesday morning. The headline wasn't subtle. "The Personal is Professional, a Developer's Eviction Playbook." It had a photo of 1711 Elm, the scaffolding like braces on tired teeth. Below it was a professional headshot of Aiden, looking confident and clean-cut. The article was a masterpiece of damning juxtaposition. It detailed his buying spree in the neighborhood, his company's rhetoric about community revitalization. Then it pivoted. But for the tenants of 1711 Elm, Cole's vision feels like eradication. It quoted Mrs. Grady's tearful goodbye, Stan's bitterness, and then the centerpiece, my story. Anya reported it with clinical precision, laying out the timeline of our relationship alongside his timeline of eviction plans. She quoted the texts. She quoted his line about impediment to ROI from my recording. And most devastatingly, she'd gotten hold of his project proposal to investors. A line was highlighted. "Current tenancy presents a drag on valuation. A swift vacancy strategy, utilizing all legal means available, is required to meet projected returns." And in an appendix, the floor plans showed Unit 3B redesigned as a premium studio loft, with a notation, "Can serve as model unit to drive pre-leasing." The owner move-in claim was obliterated. In black and white for anyone to see were his real intentions. The fallout was immediate and electric. The story was shared by every tenants' rights group in the city. It was picked up by local news. A protest organized by a citywide housing coalition materialized on our sidewalk the next day. 30 people with signs that read, "Coal equals cold," and "Homes over profit." I watched from my window, my heart hammering. This was what I wanted, and it was terrifying. My phone rang. It was Aiden. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. Finally, a text. "We need to talk, now. This is out of control." I texted back, "My lawyer's number is on the objection you received. All communication should go through her." His response was instantaneous. "Don't do this, Maya. You're destroying everything I've built." I didn't answer. He'd made it clear what he was building on top of. The foundation were our homes, our trust, my naivete. An hour later, there was a pounding on my door. Not a knock, a fist. "Maya, open the door. I know you're in there." It was him. His voice was ragged, stripped of all his polished control. I peered through the peephole. He looked wrecked. His hair was disheveled, his shirt untucked. The CEO was gone. This was just a man, desperate and cornered. "Go away, Aiden. Please, 5 minutes, just please." Against every instinct of self-preservation, I unchained the door and opened it a crack, leaving the deadbolt engaged. He looked at me through the gap, his eyes bloodshot. "You have to retract it," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Tell the reporter you lied. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. I'll tear up the notice. I'll renew your lease at the old rate. 2 years. Just make it stop." I stared at him. Even now, in his desperation, it was a transaction, a trade, my silence for my home. I didn't lie. You're twisting it. What we had was real, and you're making it sound sordid, like some power play. Was it? I asked, quietly. You had all the power. You still do. You just don't like how I'm using my voice. My investors are pulling out, he burst out, the words ripped from him. That article, it makes me look like a predator, a monster. I'm not a monster, Maya. I'm trying to build something. You were trying to build it on top of me, I said, the steel back in my voice. You made it personal when you served that notice. You made it war. You don't get to complain about the weapons I choose. He slumped against the doorframe, the fight draining from him. For a moment, he was just the tired carpenter from the basement. What do you want? Just tell me what you want. It was the question I'd been waiting for, the moment of leverage. I want you to rescind all the owner move-in notices for everyone. I want to offer lease renewals to all current tenants at their current rents with a cap on increases tied to inflation for the next 5 years. And I want a legally binding commitment that this building will maintain 40% affordable units in perpetuity. I'd rehearsed it with Rosa. It was a list designed to be impossible for him. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You might as well ask me to burn the building down. The numbers don't work. I'd go bankrupt. Then maybe your business model is flawed, I said. Maybe building a future shouldn't require erasing the past. He looked at me, and I saw a complex storm in his eyes. Hatred, respect, bewilderment, and a dawning, horrified realization. He had underestimated me. He'd seen the tenant, the girlfriend, the complication. He hadn't seen the strategist. I can't give you that, he whispered. Then we have nothing to talk about. I started to close the door. His hand